Anytime loot drops, everybody wants it. Do you need? But in a Race to World First Guild, of course, you need to have a better system for distributing loot. So we need to talk about simming. Jordan, as our resident DPS player, what is simming? How does it work? How are they deciding who gets each item of loot?
Well, as a mage, it should all go to me, really.
Wise.
Agreed.
But simming is such an integral, massive part, especially in WoW. There are so many different sources for gear. There's so much gear as well. And with how stats work, if you change one piece that could have crit mastery and now it has haste burst, that's going to change your whole stat composition, basically. So simming is where you take the gear that you have available to your character, what you've got in your bags, what you've been given, and it will quickly run the math, and it will give you what combination of gear is mathematically the best for your DPS, how much numbers you can put out. Is it better to put a socket, for example, in this piece, or is it better to upgrade the item level of this piece? It's just all of these tiny, tiny micro decisions the sim will put in, and it will churn out a number that you don't necessarily pay too much attention to. You only really care about that number in terms of what gear makes it higher. I want to be able to be pumping out as much damn as possible. Go up. And that's essentially what simming is. What trinkets best, for example. I mean, we run so many sims, right, Corella?
Yeah, we did. And a good thing to do as well in a Race to World First is to sim before getting into the raid. You can sim all the loot of the raid, and you post this to Discord so the analysts can actually have access to it. So basically, when the loot drops, they will assign it to the person that wins the more DPS. Legit, it's written you gain, like, for example, 1k DPS, the other one is like 800, so then you're gonna give it to him. Of course, you can always talk to them by saying, okay, it allows me to move my embellishment, so maybe it's better for me. But then you always already have the picture who is gonna get the loot and stuff, because you have 4 hours to distribute it, and also you have to move on to the next boss and stuff. So you cannot really waste time with loot, and also it's really important to give it to the correct person.
Yeah, that's such a good point, because with everyone in the raid, you want to be giving the items to who mathematically it's best for. And you could have a trinket that is so much stronger for a certain spec than another, just because of the damage composition, for example. If you've got a burst damage profile spec, that burst damage profile spec does a lot more burst in their 10-second window than another, then it would be much more beneficial to give this trinket that buffs that 10 seconds to that spec over another. So yeah, it's really important to kind of compare who this item is mathematically best for as well.
Yeah, there is also one more thing to take into account is that, for example, the mage is going to stay in the comp because he gives the int buff. So if you're thinking in between like a mage or a shadow priest, it will probably go to the mage because you know he's going to be there for the last boss. And that's also important to think what the comp is going to look like, because you don't want to give loot to someone that is going to be benched afterwards.
Yeah, I think that's like such an important thing. Being able to go into the raid and knowing if this drops, where is it going, rather than having to spend any time doing that. It's all about that preparation side of things, right? If you've got it all sorted out beforehand, you go in, you get it done. The last thing you want to be doing is like, okay, this piece dropped. Everyone send me your sims, let's see who's got the best, and then afterwards the sims come in. Doesn't even help, because you're just like, well, actually it means this and that and this. It's way better, just leave it to the analyst. If you can go into the raid with a really strong vision as to not only who do you want to have geared, but which gear is actually useful for them in comparison to someone else, it just saves you all the time in the world, which is obviously important in the race.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, when we were talking literally about even splits versus, what you're doing with your Mythic Prog, right? Every second counts. You have to divide your time, but you're literally in a race, right? It seems so silly, but a lot of times when people are going on and they're like, oh wait, they're not doing this because of this or this, or why are they simming? That seems ridiculous. Like, that's not going to save that much time. But literally, again, those minutes spent talking can make the difference between who has gotten a kill or not. And so if you know exactly what you're doing, you can optimize that time, because if something drops and you don't know if it's going to drop again within a reasonable time frame, and you give that to the wrong person, or somebody gets it and they're like, oh, this wasn't actually, the most optimal, then you have just wasted all of the time you spent trying to get that thing for someone. And I mean, Jesse, I don't know if you have any other thoughts on this topic, particularly with simming as well, too.
Nope.
Awesome.
Healer POV. Hang on a minute.
Cool. No, never mind. Jesse doesn't have any. You know, maybe pre-Duke.
100% is going in the video.
I knew he was going to do it. I was trying to get people
Healers
to
don't sim.
I wanted everybody to throw back to you. So I was just like, Jesse, what do you think about this?
Healers don't get loot anyway.
Yeah, I mean, as a healer myself, I'm like, I don't have a lot to contribute here. So
Earlier when Carla was talking about splits and she said, oh yeah, at the end of the split you get handed 15 pieces of loot and it feels so good. I'm just like,
You know what? Sometimes I was getting 15, and they were like, "No, this is not gonna be your main afterwards."
yeah, that's just an all.
The other evoker.
Meanwhile, the healers are getting dregs.
we scratch what we can. You know, we clawed together and good duct taped it to our bodies.
Yeah, I'll bring us back. I'll get us on topic. Anyway, another advantage of simming is when they do actually break into going and doing Mythic Plus, is that it'll tell you which dungeons your upgrades still lie in, which is actually one of the big advantages of the new simming tools, is it'll say, hey, you actually get really good shoulders from X Mythic dungeon. So when they do break up, they can focus on those dungeons.
Yeah, you can see that quite a lot.
Optimizer.
Yeah, especially like during heroic splits and things like that. Not always your character is going to be needed. It'll be an excellent opportunity for you to just go away, go try out one of those mythic dungeons, try and get those trinkets. We've seen before in other races where there's been people sat on early mythic bosses even. They've just been farming trinkets over and over again, desperately trying to get it. So that because it's just such a big increase. So having things being able to point that out as to how strong certain items are is a really, really important thing for the players to be aware of.
What do you think, Jesse?
I think that's true, absolutely, because particularly, you're trying to get me to say nope again? You wanted me to say nope? No.
You have any
no.
thoughts, Jesse?
I have something to say here. This is meaningful. When you have approximately 30 players on your roster, many of whom will have at least 2 potential mains, maybe even more. You're talking about a large number of characters that will not be in a mythic raid limited to only 20 people. So you're going to have a lot of characters that are not in the raid, a lot of players who are not in the raid who can still productively use their time to gain power that could conceivably be useful for winning the race world first. So they're going to be doing things like Mythic Plus or whatever else they can do to acquire any kind of power. Anytime you can commit to gaining power for the end of the race world first is very valuable time. So you're not going to see players that are benched just out there not doing anything. Sometimes people will be specifically benched to go farm a specific trinket or to go farm a specific weapon so that they can then come back in later. Corella made a really good point earlier about how you typically want to make it so that whatever composition of players and classes you anticipate using on the final boss, whatever that looks like, you want as many of those characters as possible to be in for every previous boss to maximize the chance that they get all of the loot, and every single item that dropped in the mythic raid from the earlier bosses is in for the end boss. It's a tragedy if you give 2 pieces of mythic loot from the 2 first bosses to some character that then ends up not being used on the last boss. So you're always trying to plan ahead and anticipate, okay, we want to use a Shadow Priest on this boss because it brings something particularly useful. Don't ask me what. For this early, easy boss that makes it die 30 minutes faster, but we don't want to put gear on the Shadow Priest that we expect won't be available for the end boss later. So you'll often see comps made on the first bosses that are suboptimal, right, Corella? Like you'll see bad comps on early bosses just to make sure gear's going on characters that you really want the gear on.
Yeah, exactly. And also one thing that is really important is the vaults.
No.
Because when you don't know when, so it probably will go to the second week, and you don't know how many bosses you will be at the end of the first week. And sometimes you will be like, okay, we benched this person on the very first boss, and we will probably bring it to the last one, and now he's missing one option in his vault, and this is really tragic when it happens. So this is also one thing to think about.
That reminds me of something else with simming. You'll see everyone run to their vault on Wednesday morning as soon as it becomes available to loot it, right? And then no one will take any loot. No one takes loot. They all have to go into the spreadsheet and sim every single item, find out not only which of the pieces from the vault is the biggest net total upgrade, substituting it for the gear, but also what that might mean for their splits. They might not loot that until after splits or near the end of the week, or even deep into mythic progression, so that they can see, okay, well, if I get this weapon off of the third boss, then I won't take the weapon from my vault, I'll take the trinket instead. But if I don't get the weapon off the third boss, then I will take the trinket out of the vault. So simming can kind of branch out into these very complicated web of possibilities, depending on where you have particular upgrades available to you.
Yeah, that's also one of the analyst's job. It's like you screenshot your vaults, you send it to them, and they're like telling you, okay, you wait until this boss, and then if this drops, then you take it, or if it gets attributed to you, it's fine. Then the other one will take it. So yeah, it's also like a big decision making with all the analyst team.
I know it sounds so complicated, and for each person you might see weird things like it's a 1% upgrade, 0.8%. But the point is, as we talked about earlier, with the difficulty of the later bosses, when you magnify that across 20 or even 25 characters, it's an enormous difference to raid output as a whole. It's not a case of like, oh, it's 1-2%, whatever. If you magnify that by all those players, all this math, all this analyst work, all of this culminates in a dramatic increase, which is again why we generally see highest item level wins, which is why somebody taking an item or being given the wrong item can be one of those decisions that's like, that actually costs us the race. Like, we have seen some furious moments where someone's accidentally clicked this item was really sure that's the one I would take, and then they've done the first split or something like that, or the first boss, and actually it's dropped. And now it's, you could have taken this other thing, and we would have given you that one, and that would have led to this and this and this snowballing effect that can happen with loot in such an important game. And Simming can really help out with that by giving us all the options. What bosses can we clear early in the Mythic Raid? Certainly if we go to the second week and we have all those vaults, wait. A lot of this loot comes off the bosses we've already killed. So what does that option does that give us when we go into those? Which is why they, like Jesse said, we have this weird moment where they're all really excited to look at loot and then close it and not go near it again.
Yep. It's like Christmas, but you can't actually have the present.
Yeah.